Good morning. I figured I would record a Bible lesson for the day. And it's been a while since we've done Bible, so I have to recap a little bit. Last time we were in 1 Samuel 20, and we were discussing, remember, David and Jonathan. David was telling Jonathan that Saul was still trying to kill him. Jonathan knew Saul had tried to kill him in the past, but Jonathan was like, no, he's not trying to do that anymore. He would tell me, I'm his son, he told me before. He would tell me if he's still trying to kill you. And and so Jonathan was convinced he wasn't, so they did the whole thing where David didn't show up at the feast, and they waited and watched Saul's reaction. Of course, Saul was angry, threw a spear at Jonathan when Jonathan gave him the excuse, and so Jonathan realized, wow, David's right. He is trying to kill him, and they went back to the field and did the whole shooting the arrows thing, and where it's beside you or beyond you, and with the little kid, and that was a signal to David. And so David now is on the run. In 1 Samuel 21, he's officially on the run now. And it says in verse 1, now David came to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest, and Ahimelech was afraid when he met David and said to him, why are you alone and no one is with you? And so David shows up here by himself, which is very strange for like an official of the king. Usually they had a big entourage, but it's just David. And so he says, why isn't anybody with you? In verse 2, David tells him, well, I have, the young men who are with me. Now, I don't know if they're actually young men with him or not. He shows up here by himself, and so he tells him, oh, yeah, I told my young men to go to such and such a place where they're kind of hiding out, and because I'm on a secret mission. That's what it is. I'm on a secret mission from the king. So I can't really tell you about it, and I got to swear you to secrecy. You can't tell anybody I was here. And the Ahimelech, the priest, goes, Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. No, I understand. I want to do the right thing here. I won't tell anybody you're here. And think about it. Ahimelech has no reason to doubt David. He assumes David's on a good plane with the king. He's known as the king's man. He's become one of the famous celebrities in Israel over the last couple of years. And so David comes and says, and asks him, what do you have on hand? Give me five loaves of bread or whatever you can find, in verse 3. In verse 4, he says, I don't have any common bread. I don't have any like regular bread, but there's the holy bread, which is the show bread, which we read about back in Leviticus. If you remember, the show bread was it was like the priests would eat the show bread right in view of the ark. And it was like they were eating with God, because back then when you were having a meal with somebody, it was almost like you were becoming one with them. So it was really a privilege for the priests to eat the showbread. And and so the priest says, I just have this holy bread, the showbread here, and if you've consecrated yourselves essentially. In verse 5, David's like, truly, yep, we're fine. And the bread, even though it's consecrated, it's fine, we can eat it. So the priest in verse 6 gives him the holy bread, gives him the showbread. Verse 7, so he gives him the bread, and David's like, okay, great, I have a little bit of food, because remember, he just ran from a field. He didn't have anything with him, and so he stopped there, got some bread for him to eat for his journey. Now, verse 7. It says, now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord. He had to kind of wait over. I don't know if it was like a layover place. You paint a picture if you're going from flying from Boston to California, and you have to lay over in Kansas City or something like that, and you're just kind of sitting there waiting for a flight. And so he was detained before the Lord. He was detained there, Doeg, this Edomite, one of the servants of Saul, and he was one of Saul's herdsmen. And so that's something to keep in mind later. He's just kind of sitting there and sitting in the back, kind of observing what's going on. He probably can't hear the conversation, but he sees David there and kind of makes a mental note of it. And that'll come into play later. Verse 8, and David said, hey, is there not here on hand a spear or a sword? He's like, just wondering, do you happen to have like a weapon of some kind, or you just happen to have one lying around? I haven't brought my weapons with me because, the king's business required me to... the king's business required me to leave quickly, and and so I couldn't bring it with me. And so the priest in verse 9 says, well, we have, I mean, the sword you know very well. We have the sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom you killed. You know that guy, a big sword, you used it and it chopped off his head. He goes, if you want to take it, feel free. I mean, it's really deservedly yours. So they must have set up like a monument to the slaying of Goliath there. And so David says, there is none like it, give it to me, meaning like that's a sword right there, I'll take it. And a little side note, it's kind of a little bit sad right now. It's kind of sad right now because sorry. It's kind of sad right now because David before, you see, you know, all the benefits that sword did for Goliath. I mean, what did it do for Goliath? Nothing at all. Obviously that was a lot due to Goliath's pride, but that sword didn't do Goliath very good. But David right now is trusting him. Back when he was slaying Goliath, he's trusting in God. He said, I don't even need the king's armor. I don't need anything. I just have my slingshot here, and that's going to be fine because I'm going to win no matter what because God's on my side. Now we see his attitude. He comes in, he lies to Ahimelech, try to get some bread, and he lies, and he also trusts in the sword in order to give himself, to protect himself. And so it's kind of sad that he doesn't rely on God to provide food for him. He doesn't rely on God to protect him. He instead relies on man. So he's kind of getting, we see there's a period of David's life. David's life is like a big roller coaster, up and down and up and down and up and down. Right now he's in kind of one of those, he's heading into one of those low points where he kind of gets his eyes off God for a little while. And he's still a man after God's own heart, and God still loves him, but he gets his eyes off of God for a little while here, and he's trusting in trying to lie to get food. He's trusting in Goliath's sword to somehow protect. I don't even know how the guy would pick up the sword. It's probably enormous, but like, you know, it's huge. But anyway, so from there in verse 10, he flees away. And where does he go? He goes to Gath. Gath is a Philistine city. And it says, and David arose and fled that day from before Saul and went to Achish, king of Gath. And the servant of Achish said to him, Is this not David, the king of the land? Did they not sing to him, to one another, and dances, saying, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000? So he comes into Gath, probably tries to lay low, maybe, you know, a hood on or whatever. And so he just kind of, you know, if you can picture somebody in a movie, kind of trying to keep a low profile, walking around, but guess what? He's recognized. He is picture. He killed their champion, Goliath, who was their celebrity, who was their number one guy. The whole country was like, Goliath, he's our champion, he's our number one fighter, and everybody, he was the hero of the Philistines. And then this little kid beats him. I mean, if you had like the biggest heavyweight fighter, toughest heavyweight fighter ever, huge, strong MMA fighter, enormous guy, he just destroys everyone. And he's like, and that's the only sport that anybody every single person follows, and everybody's into it, and everybody knows this guy. He's awesome. He's the best. He's never been beaten. And all of a sudden, this like little, small, short guy comes up and goes, "I'll challenge you," and beats him. Everybody would know who that small guy was. And not only that, they know who he is, but they're angry at him. He's like the, you know, America's Most Wanted, but it's the Philistines' Most Wanted, number one wanted guy. He's the one who defeated Goliath. And so he tries to keep a low profile here, and they're like, wait a minute, I know you. I was there that day. You're that kid who killed Goliath. And I can see probably panic in David's eyes as he kind of looks around and people start recognizing him. And if you want to be in a place where, this is like the worst possible place for David to be in. And so David took these words to heart and was very afraid, was very much, he was panicked in that setting. And in his fear, verse 13, it said he changed his behavior before them, pretended madness in their hands, scratched the doors of the gate, and let his saliva fall on his beard. So literally, they start recognizing, isn't this David? Oh yeah, I think that's David. I think that's the guy. I think that's the guy who beat the Philistine. I think everybody's recognizing him, and he's like in a panic. he just starts like drooling and going rah, and scratching the doorpost, and probably rolling around and doing all these things to make himself look like he's insane. And so they brought him before the king and said, "Hey, king, we found the guy who killed Goliath." The king's like, "Okay, bring him to me." And then they bring him in, and he's like rah, and like doing all these crazy things. And verse 14, Achish says, "Look, you see the man is insane. Why have you brought him?" He goes, "Why have you brought him to me? Have I need of a madman that you have brought this fellow to play the madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house?" And so David's sitting there rolling all around, going crazy. And Achish is like, he's gross. He's gross. He weirds me out. Gives me the heebie-jeebies. Get him away. I don't want him here. And he's like, and the guy's like, but this is. He goes, "I don't get him away. Get him away." "But king, this is nope. Get him away." And so David narrowly escapes. But I want to have you keep in mind that David shouldn't need to narrowly escape. He needs to rely on God, and that's one thing he's not doing. And I think this wakes him up, because in chapter 22, it said, "So David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam." This is back in Israel again, but it's in a cave. There are lots and lots of little caves in there, and he comes to this one cave called Adullam. And so he goes to this cave and just kind of lives in this cave. And interestingly, he just kind of hangs out there. And it says his brothers and all his father's house heard it, and they went down to him. They probably go and visit him and say, "Hey, is everything okay? I know you're on the run here. Are you doing all right?" And so they visit him there. And interestingly, it says, and everyone who's in verse 2 of 22, everyone who's in distress, everyone who's in debt, everyone who's discontented gathered to him. So he became captain over them, and there were about 400 men with him. Interestingly, these people end up just automatically coming to him. He wasn't like blowing a trumpet and saying, "Come on, let's go, let's gather up, come on, let's get together." But people just gathered to him. And when you are relying on God, he'll give you what you need. Instead of him relying on himself, the previous chapter, we see him kind of come back to Israel, and kind of it's a wake up call a little bit, and he kind of starts relying on God a little bit, at least in this chapter, and all these people come to him. Now, interestingly, they aren't necessarily the people that you'd want. It says everyone who's in distress, everyone who's in debt, and everyone who's discontented. Everyone who's in distress, meaning they are really panicked. I mean, think about it. Would you want, if you were gathering up an army, would you want the people who are panicked, like, "I just don't know what to do. I don't know what to do"? And then the people who are in debt, if you're in debt, usually what that means is you're a poor planner. Maybe you were like, "Oh yeah, I want to buy a boat on my credit card and buy this brand new Ferrari. How are you going to pay for it?" "I'll figure it out at the end of the month." And all these people are in debt, at least some of whom are, I'm sure, poorly organized. And everyone who's discontented. So the discontented people are like complainers, critics, being like, "I don't like this, I don't like that." And I don't know if you've ever been around somebody like that. They're just miserable to be around, usually. And they're like, "I don't like this. This is dumb. How was that movie you saw?" "Oh, it was terrible." "Well, what about what's a good movie?" I remember having a friend one time who was always like that. Every movie we went and saw, he was like, "It wasn't that good. It wasn't that good. It wasn't that good." I wanted to be like, "What movies do you like?" And he probably would be like, "I don't know," because every movie he saw I thought was terrible. And so these are the people that come to him: people who are in distress, who are panicked, people who are disorganized and poor planners in debt, and people who are complainers. These are the people that come to him. Not necessarily the cream of the crop that you'd necessarily want, but we're going to see that in the presence of David, when David is relying on God, these men go from being in distress, discontent, complainers, whatever, into valiant, mighty men, because their hearts are changed, because they're around a man who has the Spirit of God in him, and he can change them, and because the Spirit of God is contagious, it changes us. And so I'm not going to go through the whole thing here. I'll go a little bit more though. And so he goes from Mitzpah there to Moab, and he goes to he mentions to the king of Moab. He says, "Can my family stay with you?" Because rightly so, he was worried about his family. And he said, "Can I just have my parents stay here with you? I would appreciate it." And the king of Moab said, "Sure, let them dwell in Moab, so Saul didn't go after them or use them somehow. And the prophet Gad comes to David, a guy named Gad. He wasn't the Gad that the tribe of Israel is named after, but some prophet named Gad. He tells David a message from God: don't stay here, depart and go to the land of Judah. He said, don't stay in Moab. So David said, okay, and he's listening to God, and he goes back into Judah, to the forest of Hereth. And in verse 6, Saul hears that David and the men who were with him had been discovered. And he's standing around the trees, angry, and you see him just rah. He said with a spear in his hand, and all his servants standing about him. And he said, "Hear now, you Benjamites, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards, and make you captains of thousands and captains of hundreds?" Basically saying, what, did he bribe you? Who's not telling me where he is? What is he going to give you? Thousands of dollars, millions of dollars? What's he going to give you? Why are you not telling me where he is? He's just a very paranoid guy, screaming at everyone around him. He says, verse 8, all of you conspired against me. There's no one that reveals to me that my son made a covenant with the son of Jesse. So he somehow finds that, either finds out that Jonathan had made a covenant with David, or that he just simply suspects that he made a covenant with him. And he even says, there is not one of you who is sorry for me, or reveals to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait, as in this day. And think of it. Remember, when somebody is like this, when we talked about Saul as being a people pleaser and insecure, he twists the words and twists the reality. He's saying David is the one that's lying in wait, seeking to jump out and kill Saul. When in actuality, it's Saul that's lying in wait. And so the very thing that Saul is doing, he's blaming on David. And so he's screaming all these guys, and all of a sudden, you can see a hand raised up from the back, or, excuse me, King? He goes, what? And here's a guy named Doeg. He said, sir, I saw the son of Jesse going to Nob, to Ahimelech, the priest. And so we see it's one of those things like, dun, dun, dun. He was seen earlier at that place, and so King said, what went on? He goes, well, in verse 10, he inquired of the Lord for him, gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath. He gave him food and bread, and gave him the sword of Goliath. So you can picture Saul, not knowing the details, he's just furious. Goes to sent to call to Ahimelech the priest, and a son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, and all the priests who were in Nob, and they all came to the king. So they all come there to all the priests, and there was I think 81 of them, I believe it's going to say, and they all come to the palace. And so they're like, "Oh, what's going on, king?" They don't suspect anything. They have no idea what's going on. And so Saul comes right out with the accusation of verse 13. Why have you conspired against me? You and the son of Jesse, they've given him bread and a sword and inquired of God for him that he should rise against me to lie in wait as in this day, and all this stuff. And he starts screaming at him. And Ahimelech rightly is like, what are you talking about? I had no idea any of this. He says to him, who among all your servants is as faithful as David, who's the king's son-in-law? He's your son-in-law. He's a faithful servant. He's honorable in your house. He goes, and he's telling him, he goes in your bidding. He does what you want. I mean, that's all I know about him. I don't know anything about him lying in wait. Verse 15, then, did I then begin to inquire of God for him? Far be it from me. Of course I did. I mean, I thought he was your servant. I thought you guys were on good terms. If he comes to me and says, hey, can you inquire of God for me? I would say, sure. And give him provision? Sure. He goes, I knew nothing. In verse 15 says, for your servant knew nothing of this, little or much. I didn't know anything about it. And the king said to Ahimelech, you shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house. And you see the paranoia and the the violence and the lack of compassion that comes from being this self-absorbed, insecure people pleaser that Saul is. And he says to the guards around him, he goes, kill all of them. But the guards are holier than Saul, and the servants of the king wouldn't lift their hands and strike the priest. They're like, I'm not killing the priest. I'm not going to do that. And so he tells them, go kill them. And none of the servants would do it. And the priests are standing there, and the king turns to Doeg. And remember, Doeg is from Edom. He doesn't care. He doesn't really care about any of these traditions of Israel. He probably doesn't even worship the God of Israel. And so he turns to Doeg and says, turn and strike the priests, kill all of them. And he went and killed, it was 85. And he went and killed 85 of them, probably trapped in the room. They probably locked the doors. And Doeg just goes through the room and just kills them. Think about it. 84 out of those 85 priests didn't even know David was there that day. It was just a Hittite, but just the fact that they were associated with Ahimelech, Saul has them killed. and it says, in addition to that, the city Nob, where the priests were from, he struck with the edge of the sword both men and women, children and nursing infants, oxen and donkeys and sheep. He destroys them all. Saul's hatred just knows no end. He's gotten in such a bad, awful position. However, one of Ahimelech's sons ends up escaping, a guy named Abiathar. I don't know how he escaped. I don't know if it was through a window or whether there was an open door. But luckily, God preserves one of them, Abiathar, Ahimelech's son. Ahimelech was the main priest. His son escapes, and where does he go? He flees to David, of course. And Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priests, and David is just distraught. He said, I knew that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that surely he would tell Saul, I have caused the death of all the persons of your father's house. Think about the difference there. Saul is lying about David, ascribing to David things that David didn't do. That he's lying in wait to try to kill me. No, that's not true. He's not doing that. He's conspired against me. That's not true. It's really what Saul's doing. He's lying and saying David's doing. Now, look at the attitude of David, a man after God's own heart, and he really, really gets a wake-up call. Here we see him really seek after God after this part. He didn't do anything. He didn't kill the priests, but he said, it's my fault because I went there. And he blames himself, and he says, man, I shouldn't have, and he feels awful about it. Even though, again, it was Saul that did that. But David said, I played a part in that. If I had just gone and probably trusted the Lord and not relied on anybody else other than God and gotten alone with God instead of going to the priest to get stuff, all of them will be alive right now. And he blames himself. So see that attitude. The difference between Saul, who is, using earthly wisdom right now. He's just really in a terrible way right now, using, lacking God's hand on his life. Nothing Saul does is his fault. He's defensive and he can never be wrong. Versus David, when something clearly wasn't his fault, he still says, man, I could have done better. I could have done better. And he doesn't even blame Saul. He says, it's me, it's my fault. And so he tells Abiathar, stay with me, do not fear, for he seeks my life, seeks your life, seeks my life, seeks your life, but with me you shall stay safe. So that's 1 Samuel 21 and 22. We'll keep going next time. Stay in your Bibles, stay praying. I could use some prayer myself. Stepped on a nail yesterday, so I'm kind of limping around. So if you can pray for me, I'll be praying for you guys. All right. See you later.